The crack of his palm against her face echoed through the emergency room like a gunshot. Dr. Victor Harrington, chief of trauma surgery and golden child of Boston's medical elite, stood over the new nurse with his fingers still wrapped in her hair. He wrenched her head back until the tendons in her neck stood out like cables. "Know your place," he hissed, his breath hot against her ear. Garbage. The entire trauma bay went silent. Monitors beeped into the void. Nurses froze mid-task. Every person in that sterile fluorescent hell expected tears. They expected the quiet, mousy travel nurse to crumble, to apologize through sobs, to flee. They didn't know. The woman standing in those ill-fitting blue scrubs wasn't just a nurse. She was Captain Maya Reyes, decorated combat medic from the 75th Ranger Regiment, a woman who had performed emergency thoracotomies in the cargo holds of burning helicopters while enemy fire punched through the fuselage around her. And Dr. Victor Harrington had just made the worst decision of his privileged, protected life. Mercy General Hospital sat on the edge of Boston's financial district, like a fortress of glass and steel. It wasn't a hospital so much as a monument to the Harrington family's generosity and their tax write-offs. Inside its walls, a different kind of war raged every hour. No mortars, no improvised explosives, just the desperate race against failing hearts and severed arteries and the endless shriek of incoming ambulances. Maya Reyes moved through this chaos like a ghost. At 34, she should have looked young. Instead, her eyes carried decades of weight that her colleagues couldn't comprehend. She'd been at Mercy General for 92 days. In that time, she'd spoken perhaps 40 complete sentences to the staff. She scrubbed bedpans. She restocked IV drips. She took the graveyard shifts that made other nurses shudder. To everyone around her, she was a nobody. A drifter nurse with a sparse resume and a disposition that suggested she'd flinch at loud noises. They couldn't have been more wrong. "Reyes!" Victor Harrington's voice sliced through the trauma bay like a scalpel. "I needed those instruments 30 seconds ago. Do you have any idea what my time is worth?" Maya collected the tray of sterilized tools and walked to where Harrington was suturing a laceration on an unconscious teenager. She didn't hurry. She didn't grovel. "Apologies, doctor." Her voice was flat, empty, a perfectly crafted disguise. Harrington snatched a hemostat from the tray, deliberately grinding his gloved fingers against her bare hand before wiping his glove on his surgical gown as though she'd contaminated him. Across the room, the nursing staff watched with the grim familiarity of people who'd witnessed this performance 100 times. "He's on a tear today," whispered Janelle, adjusting her bright yellow scrubs. "Stock portfolio probably tanked. Or his wife caught him with that pharma rep again," muttered Marcus, the charge nurse. His weathered face tightened as he watched Maya disappear into the supply room. "I don't understand how Reyes takes it. No spine at all. If Harrington talked to me like that..." "You'd do what?" Janelle's laugh was bitter. "Report him to HR? His father owns the board. Reyes is just easy prey. She's like smoke. I asked her where she transferred from and she just stared at me until I gave up." In the supply closet, Maya pressed her forehead against cool metal shelving and counted her breaths. 4 seconds in. Hold. 4 seconds out. Her hands were steady. They had been steady in the Korangal Valley when a rocket-propelled grenade turned her convoy into a crematorium. They had been steady when she'd packed her commanding officer's chest wound while rifle rounds cracked overhead from a ridgeline 300 meters distant. Men like Victor Harrington didn't frighten her. Men like him were soft. They came undone when the Wi-Fi went out. Maya had survived things that would leave Harrington catatonic and whimpering. She adjusted the long sleeves of her undershirt, the ones she wore even in the suffocating heat of the ER. They concealed the shrapnel scarring that crawled up her left forearm and the tattoo on her right wrist, the Ranger tab, ink that represented blood she'd spilled and brothers she'd buried. She wasn't here for recognition. She was here to remember how to be human again. The army had medically discharged her after the incident in Yemen, a classified extraction that had turned into a nightmare of bad intelligence and civilian casualties. Physically cleared for duty, but the psychiatrists had insisted she needed time somewhere quiet, somewhere safe. So she scrubbed floors and let a surgeon with a god complex treat her like refuse. It was part of the mission. Blend in, don't engage, survive. "Reyes!" Harrington's bellow echoed from the corridor. "Get out here! Multi-trauma incoming!" Maya opened her eyes. Something cold and hard settled back into her gaze. She pushed off the shelf and walked back into the fray. The ambulance bay doors exploded open. Paramedics stormed in, fighting against the weight of 2 gurneys surrounded by a hurricane of activity. The air turned thick with the copper stench of blood and the ozone smell of a coming storm. "Talk to me." Harrington positioned himself at the center of the chaos, his chest puffed with the thrill of command. "Male, approximately 55. The lead paramedic's voice cracked with strain. "Multiple GSWs to the chest and abdomen. Pressures crashing, 60 over palp. Lost his pulse twice en route." "Bay 1, Harrington commanded. "Marcus, get a central line in. Janelle, get blood bank on the phone. Reyes." He spun, his eyes wild with adrenaline. "Suction, don't mess it up." Maya moved to the head of the gurney. Her hands reached for the suction catheter, but her eyes locked on the patient. He was built like a weapon. Broad shoulders, powerful frame, now punctured and torn, a gray beard matted with blood, a tactical vest that paramedics had sliced open, and beneath the gore, on his shoulder, a tattoo she recognized instantly, a dagger wrapped in lightning. Her heart stuttered, special operations, and not just any operator. She knew that face, even swollen and bruised as it was. Staff Sergeant Miguel Torres. She'd trained under him at Fort Benning nearly a decade ago. He'd taught her how to shoot, how to fight, how to survive. "He's crashing!" Marcus's voice cut through her thoughts. "V-fib!" "Paddles!" Harrington screamed. "Charge to 200!" The room condensed into chaos, controlled, practiced, but chaos nonetheless. Maya cleared the airway with mechanical precision, her mind racing ahead of her hands. Something was wrong. The blood pooling in the man's chest wasn't just accumulating. It was bubbling. Tension, pneumothorax. The diagnosis crystallized in her mind like ice. His lung had collapsed. Air was flooding the chest cavity, crushing his heart. No amount of electrical shock would fix a mechanical problem. "Clear." Harrington slammed the paddles down. Torres's body convulsed. Nothing. "Still V-fib," Marcus called out. "Charge to 300. "Doctor." Maya's voice cut through the noise. It wasn't the whisper she'd cultivated. It was command voice, battle voice. Breath sounds absent on the right. Tracheal deviation. It's a tension pneumo. Shocking him is useless. He needs needle decompression. Now. The room went silent. Harrington's face purpled with rage. "Excuse me? Did you go to medical school, Reyes? Did you get your degree from a Cracker Jack box? Look at the jugular distension." Maya pointed to the patient's neck, where the veins bulged grotesquely. "Decompress the chest, or he dies in 30 seconds. "Shut up." Harrington's voice cracked into a scream. "I am the attending surgeon. You are a nurse. You empty bedpans and you keep your mouth closed. Charge to 360. He shocked Torres again. The flatline tone wailed through the bay. "Damn it!" Harrington threw the paddles onto the crash cart with a clatter. "He's gone. Call it." "No." Maya didn't think. She didn't calculate consequences. She moved. She stepped past the suction unit and grabbed a 14-gauge angiocath needle from the open supply tray. "What do you think you're doing?" Harrington stepped in front of the patient, blocking her. "Get away from my table." "Move." Maya's voice dropped to something barely above a whisper, something dangerous. "Get out of my trauma bay." Harrington's face twisted with fury. "You're finished here, you understand? You are fired." He has electrical activity but no output, Maya said, her voice unnervingly calm. The pressure is killing him. I won't let him die because you're too proud to listen. That was the breaking point. Dr. Victor Harrington, who had never heard the word no from anyone beneath him in 43 years of existence, snapped. He reached out and grabbed Maya by the back of her surgical cap, his fingers twisting into her hair with vicious force. He wrenched her head back until she stumbled, until she slammed into the metal cabinetry with a crash that echoed through the sudden silence. The needle skittered across the floor. I said know your place. Spittle flew from his lips. His face was inches from hers, contorted with raw, ugly power. Worthless piece of trash. Everyone stopped. Surgeons froze mid-motion. Nurses dropped clipboards. A patient on a distant gurney began to cry. The silence was absolute, suffocating, broken only by the flatline tone still screaming from Torres's monitor. Harrington stood there, chest heaving, riding the high of his own cruelty. He expected tears. He expected the mousy nurse to collapse into sobs, to flee the room in humiliation, to leave him in peace to pronounce the patient dead. Maya lowered her head slowly. She reached up and touched the back of her skull where he'd torn at her hair. She adjusted her cap. When she lifted her gaze again, something fundamental had changed. The fear everyone expected wasn't there. The quiet nurse was gone. In her place stood something that made Marcus step back involuntarily, something that made the temperature in the room seem to drop. Her posture shifted, shoulders squared, feet planted at shoulder width, weight balanced on the balls of her feet. It was a combat stance, instantly recognizable to anyone who'd served. You shouldn't have done that. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried weight, power, promise. Get security! Harrington's voice wavered despite his bravado. Get this lunatic out of my hospital! Maya ignored him. Marcus, 10-blade and a chest tube kit. Reyes, stop! Marcus stammered. He's the chief. Now! Harrington reached for her again. I told you to... What happened next took less than 2 seconds. As Harrington's hand shot toward her, Maya stepped into his guard instead of away. She trapped his wrist with one hand, applied surgical pressure to the radial nerve, and swept his lead leg. The security footage, reviewed later, would need to be slowed to quarter speed for anyone to understand the technique. One moment, Harrington was standing. The next, he was face down on the linoleum, his arm twisted behind his back at an angle that tore a high-pitched scream from his throat. Stay down. It wasn't a request. It was an order given by an officer to a hostile combatant. This isn't optional. She released him and stepped over his groaning form. She walked to the patient, collected a fresh needle, and looked at Marcus. His jaw hung slack. Time me. Maya located the second intercostal space. She inserted the needle. Shh! The sound of escaping pressure was audible throughout the silent room. Everyone heard it, the release of the trapped air that had been crushing Torres's heart. The monitor beeped. Once, twice, beep, beep, beep. Sinus rhythm. Maya looked down at Harrington, who was crawling to his knees, cradling his wrist, his face purple with shock and humiliation. He's alive, she said, stripping off her gloves. And you, doctor, are done. Harrington lurched to his feet. Done! I am the chief surgeon. You assaulted me. I will have you arrested. I will destroy everything you've ever... Maya's gaze locked onto his. She reached for the hem of her long-sleeve undershirt and slowly rolled it up, revealing the scarred muscle of her forearm and the distinctive ink on her wrist. I know exactly who you are, Harrington. You're a liability. She turned to Marcus. Call the police. Then call General Morrison at the Pentagon. Tell him Ghost has been compromised. General? Marcus's voice cracked. Who? Just make the call. Maya turned back to stabilize her former instructor. And keep this man away from my patient. The arrival of Boston PD was not subtle. 2 uniformed officers, trailed by a hospital administrator who looked like he might faint, pushed through the trauma bay doors. Doctor Harrington was waiting for them, an ice pack pressed to his wrist, his composure rebuilt into a mask of practiced victimhood. "That's her." He pointed at Maya with a trembling finger. "Officer, that woman is dangerously unstable. She disobeyed direct medical orders, endangered a patient's life, and when I tried to intervene, she physically attacked me, nearly broke my arm. I want her charged immediately." The older officer, Sergeant Brennan, approached Maya. She stood at parade rest beside Torres's bed, hands clasped behind her back, her expression unreadable. "Ma'am?" Brennan's hand drifted toward his holster. "Step away from the patient." "The patient is stable, Sergeant, but requires ICU transport. His vitals are holding, but the pneumothorax needs monitoring." "Didn't ask for a medical report. Turn around, hands behind your back." Maya complied without resistance. The cold steel of handcuffs clicked around her wrists. "You can't do this." Marcus stepped forward, his voice shaking. "She saved his life. Harrington was going to let him die." "Marcus." Harrington's eyes narrowed to slits. "Unless you want to find yourself unemployed and unhireable, I suggest you remember who signs your paychecks." Marcus froze. He looked at Maya, his eyes pleading for forgiveness. She gave him an almost imperceptible nod. "Stand down. This isn't your fight." "Get her out," Harrington sneered, "and keep the press away. I won't have this hospital's reputation tainted by association with psychotics." As the officers marched Maya through the crowded ER, patients stared from their gurneys and doctors averted their eyes. But the nurses, the ones who changed soiled sheets and held dying hands and bore the brunt of Harrington's abuse, watched her with something new in their expressions. Respect. They had seen the takedown. They knew the truth. Just as they reached the exit, a man in an impeccably tailored suit burst through the administrative doors. Edmund Harrington, chairman of the hospital board, Victor's father, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, and possessed of the casual cruelty that came from 7 decades of never hearing the word no. "Victor," Edmund's voice boomed across the lobby. "I got your message. A nurse attacked you?" "She's unstable, Father." Victor dropped his pretense instantly, his voice becoming a whine. "Nearly crippled my surgical hand." Edmund turned his predator's gaze on Maya. He walked toward her, invading her space, staring down his patrician nose. "You've made an extraordinary mistake, young lady." His voice was silk over steel. "I will ensure you never work in medicine again. I will sue you for every cent you will ever earn. By the time I'm finished, you'll be begging for a job cleaning toilets." Maya looked at him. She didn't blink. She didn't flinch. She analyzed. Elevated blood pressure, likely medicated, narcissistic presentation, aggression rooted in entitlement rather than capability, threat level, minimal. "Move along," Sergeant Brennan said, guiding Maya toward the door. As they pushed her into the back of the squad car, Maya allowed herself one glance back at the hospital entrance. Victor and Edmund Harrington stood side by side in the ambulance bay, smirking, father's arm around son's shoulder. They believed they had won. They believed this was about a lawsuit, a termination, a scandal contained. Maya leaned her head against the wire mesh separating her from the front seats. She closed her eyes and began counting. 90 seconds since the call to Morrison. The extraction team would be spinning up. The war hadn't ended for Maya Reyes. It had simply changed terrain. The interrogation room at District 4 was a gray concrete box with a flickering fluorescent light and the lingering smell of stale coffee and desperation. Maya sat on a metal chair, one wrist cuffed to the table, her expression betraying nothing. Detective Palmer sat across from her. He was a worn man, coffee stains on his tie, the eyes of someone who'd seen too much and expected too little. He dropped a thin folder on the table. "Maya Reyes." He leaned back. "Nursing license is clean but barely 3 months old. Before that, nothing. You're a ghost." Maya said nothing. her gaze fixed on a point just above his left shoulder. "Look." Palmer sighed, attempting rapport. "Dr. Harrington is connected. His father practically owns this city. They're pushing for felony assault. Assault with a deadly weapon. They claim you came at him with a scalpel." Maya's eyes finally shifted to meet his. "I didn't use a blade on him. If I'd used a blade, he wouldn't be walking." Palmer paused, unsettled by the flat certainty in her voice. "Right. Well, he says you threatened him. Witnesses are too scared to contradict him. Give me your side and maybe we can plead this down. Community service, anger management, something. I want my phone call. A public defender won't help you. The Harrington family has more lawyers than—" "I don't need a lawyer. I need one call." Palmer groaned and slid a landline phone across the table. Maya picked up the receiver. She dialed a sequence Palmer didn't recognize. Too many digits for a domestic number. "This is Sierra 79er. Her voice shifted into something harder, more precise. "Code black, location, Boston PD, District 4, asset compromised." She hung up. Palmer stared. "What was that? Who did you call?" "Get comfortable, detective." Maya settled back in her chair. "It's going to be a long night." Before Palmer could respond, the interrogation room door banged open. A man entered. His suit probably cost more than Palmer made in a month. Arthur Blackwell, the Harrington family's personal attorney. He didn't acknowledge the detective. His eyes went straight to Maya with the bored disdain of someone examining an insect. "Ms. Reyes." Blackwell placed a leather briefcase on the table. "I'm here to offer you a resolution." He slid a document toward her. "Sign this. It acknowledges that you suffered a mental health crisis, formally apologizes to Dr. Harrington, and agrees to immediate revocation of your nursing credentials. In exchange, the Harringtons will drop all criminal charges. You leave Massachusetts tonight and never return." Maya looked at the paper. It was a confession to things she hadn't done. "And if I refuse?" Blackwell smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Then you go to prison. We have the judges. We have the district attorney. You are nothing, Ms. Reyes. A smear on the windshield of a very expensive car." Maya picked up the pen. Blackwell's smile widened. She spun the pen through her fingers, a habit from her sniper days when she'd check windage before a shot. "You pulled my nursing license," she said softly. "Did you pull my DD-214? Blackwell frowned. "Your what?" "My military discharge papers." "Irrelevant. Whatever you did in the Army, peeling potatoes, driving supply trucks, has no bearing here." Boom! The steel door to the holding area slammed open with enough force to rattle the walls. "What the hell?" Palmer half rose, reaching for his weapon. Voices erupted in the hallway. Not police voices, deeper, harder, voices accustomed to command. "Federal agents, stand down! Step away from the door!" The interrogation room door was kicked open. Two men in tactical gear entered first, carbines raised, scanning corners with practiced efficiency. Behind them came a figure in Army service greens. 3 stars gleamed on his shoulder boards. Lieutenant General Morrison. Palmer's hand fell away from his gun. He raised his arms instinctively. Blackwell looked bewildered, then indignant. "This is a private interrogation. You can't simply— Do you have any idea who my clients are?" Morrison ignored him completely. He walked straight to Maya, who remained seated, still cuffed to the table. The general, a man who had commanded entire theater operations, stopped in front of the nurse. He came to attention. "Captain." "General, get those cuffs off her." Morrison's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Now." "Wait just a moment." Blackwell stepped between them. "This woman is under arrest for assaulting a prominent—" Morrison turned to look at the lawyer. It was the kind of look usually reserved for enemy combatants. Jurisdiction. Morrison's voice dropped to something dangerous. "This woman is a protected asset of the United States government. The man she assaulted nearly killed a highly decorated special operations soldier who is currently under federal protection. And you— he jabbed a finger into Blackwell's expensive lapel— are obstructing a federal investigation into medical negligence affecting a Tier 1 operator. Medical negligence? Blackwell stammered. I don't— Uncuff her. Palmer fumbled with his keys, his hands trembling, and released Maya's wrist. She stood, rubbing the marks left by the steel. Did they harm you, Captain? Negative, sir. Just wasted my time. Good. Morrison nodded toward the door. We have transport waiting. Torres is conscious. He's asking for you. Maya turned to Blackwell, who had gone pale beneath his designer tan. She leaned close. Tell the Harringtons the insect just bit back. The rooftop of Mercy General had been transformed into a command post. Military police guarded the access doors. A Black Hawk helicopter sat on the pad, rotors slowly churning. Below, in the VIP suite typically reserved for wealthy donors, Staff Sergeant Torres lay surrounded by equipment the ER could never afford. The military had brought their own medical team. Maya entered wearing a clean flight suit. It fit her better than scrubs ever had. Torres opened his eyes. Tubes snaked from his arms and nose, but the spark in his gaze was unmistakable. Ghost, his voice rasped. Thought I saw you. Figured I was dead and you were the angel come to collect. Not today, Sergeant. Maya took his hand. You had a collapsed lung. The local butcher almost fried your heart trying to shock a problem electricity couldn't fix. The surgeon? Being dealt with. Morrison stood at the window watching the city lights. He turned, his expression grim. Not fully, Captain. We have a complication. He paused. Edmund Harrington isn't backing down. He's calling in favors, senators, governors, media contacts. He's spinning a narrative that you're a rogue veteran with untreated PTSD who snapped and attacked a doctor. He's holding a press conference in 90 minutes. Maya's jaw tightened. Let him. It's not that simple. Morrison's voice carried a warning. If he digs deep enough, he might uncover Operation Sandstorm, the Yemen extraction. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Operation Sandstorm was why Maya had left the military, a classified rescue mission with catastrophic intelligence failures. Civilians had died because of bad information from CIA sources, and blame had nearly fallen on her unit. The files were sealed, buried, protected. If he exposes that, Maya said quietly, my team gets dragged through the mud. The families of the fallen. Exactly. Morrison nodded. Harrington is threatening to leak claims that you were dishonorably discharged for war crimes. He wants us to surrender you to civilian authorities and issue a public apology. He's using my reputation as a hostage to protect his son's ego. Maya's voice was cold. He's declaring war. Torres grunted from his bed. So we fight back. How? We can't silence a civilian billionaire without creating an international incident. We don't silence him. A rare, calculating smile crossed Morrison's face. We let him speak. Then we bury him with truth. He tossed a tablet to Maya. While you were detained, my intelligence officers did some digging into Dr. Harrington and his father's hospital administration. Your incident wasn't the first time Victor made a lethal mistake. Maya scrolled through the files. Her eyes widened. Case 287, wrongful death. Settled. NDA enforced. Case 441, amputation of wrong limb. Settled. NDA enforced. Case 612, lethal overdose due to medication error. Records scrubbed. There were dozens more. A graveyard of buried bodies and hush money stretching back a decade. Victor Harrington wasn't just arrogant, he was dangerous, incompetent, and his father had been using hospital funds to silence victims for years. This is a massacre, Maya whispered. It's leverage, Morrison corrected. But we need more than files. We need a witness, someone inside who can testify that these records are genuine and that Edmund Harrington ordered the cover-ups. Maya thought back to the ER. The fear in the nurse's eyes. Marcus trying to speak up before terror silenced him. And Janelle, the young nurse who managed digital archives. Janelle Chen, Maya said. She handles the trauma unit's record system. She sees everything. She's a civilian. Morrison's voice carried warning. If we approach her, we paint a target on her back. She's already a target. Everyone on that staff is a target. Harrington terrorizes them daily. Maya stood. If we give them a chance to fight back, they will. You want to return to that hospital? Into the lion's den? I need to reach Janelle before Edmund purges the servers. Maya zipped up her flight suit. If he realizes we have files, he'll delete the backups. I need the physical drives. Morrison checked his watch. You have 50 minutes before the press conference. I cannot authorize military personnel to enter a civilian hospital and seize property. It's illegal. Maya walked to the door. She looked back, her eyes carrying the intensity that had earned her the call sign. You're not sending soldiers, General. I'm just a nurse picking up her last paycheck. The basement of Mercy General was a maze of steam pipes, electrical conduits, and forgotten storage rooms. It was a world away from the sterile upper floors, and it was Maya's element. She'd traded the flight suit for a janitorial coverall swiped from a maintenance cart near the loading dock. She moved through shadows, avoiding the security cameras she'd memorized during 92 days of playing invisible. Her target, the IT server room on the 4th floor. Through a small earpiece, an intelligence officer in the helicopter above tracked her progress. Captain, be advised, 4 private security contractors are moving through the main lobby. Harrington Sr. has brought in outside muscle. They're not hospital employees. They're armed. Copy, Maya whispered, pressing herself against concrete as a janitor shuffled past. Rules of engagement? Unknown. Based on Edmund's profile, they're likely authorized for rough detainment. Avoid if possible. She reached the service elevator and used a master key card she'd lifted from a careless orderly weeks earlier. The doors opened. She stepped in and pressed 4. As the elevator rose, Maya checked her improvised weapon, a heavy wrench from the janitor's cart. Not a rifle, but in close quarters, it would shatter bone just fine. Ding. The doors opened onto the executive wing. Plush carpet, mahogany doors, the smell of money. Maya moved fast, reaching a door marked Server Archives. Locked. No keypad she could bypass. Open the door, Janelle, she whispered against the steel. I know you're in there. I know about the black files. Silence. Then a click. The door cracked open. Janelle Chen stood inside, her face pale and tear-streaked. She pulled Maya in and secured the lock behind them. The room hummed with cooling fans and blinking servers. You shouldn't have come back, Janelle's voice trembled. They're hunting you. Edmund has men everywhere. He told them you're armed. I am, Maya tapped her temple. Where are the drives? Janelle pointed to a workstation. On the screen, a progress bar filled slowly. System purge. 87% complete. They're wiping remotely. Janelle's voice cracked. Edmund called it in 20 minutes ago. Once that hits 100%, the last decade of evidence disappears forever. Can you stop it? I tried. I'm locked out of admin controls. Maya examined the server racks. If we can't stop the software, we take the hardware. Which drive holds surgical records? Bay 3, but it's... Crash. The door didn't open. It exploded inward. 2 men burst through, thick-necked, dead-eyed professionals in dark suits. One wielded a stun baton, the other held a suppressed pistol. Step away from the servers. The gunman's voice was flat, professional. Janelle screamed and dropped to the floor. Maya didn't freeze. She calculated. 10 feet. Firearm threat. Solution. Overwhelming violence. Don't shoot! She raised her hands, feigning terror. I'm just a janitor. I got lost. The gunman hesitated for a fraction of a second, confused by the coveralls. That fraction was all Maya needed. She threw the wrench. It wasn't a wild throw. It spun through the air with deadly precision and struck the gunman's nose. Cartilage crunched. He staggered backward, his pistol discharging into the ceiling. Maya launched herself at the second man. They hit the floor hard. He was strong, probably ex-military himself, but he fought with anger. Maya fought with geometry. She blocked a wild punch, drove her elbow into his solar plexus, then wrapped her legs around his neck in a triangle choke. He thrashed, clawed at her face, but Maya's thighs were iron. 3 seconds. 4. His eyes rolled back. He went limp. She rolled off him and kicked the pistol across the room, sending it under the server racks. She didn't want to kill them. She just wanted to complete the mission. She sprinted back to the servers. System purge. 96%. It's too late, Janelle sobbed. No! Maya grabbed the hard drive release. Locked. She yanked. The plastic housing cracked. She yanked again, harder, muscles burning. Maya, look out! Victor Harrington stood in the doorway. His tie was gone. Sweat plastered his hair to his forehead. His eyes were wild with something beyond rage. Desperation, maybe. Madness. And in his shaking hand, he held the pistol Maya had kicked away. You destroyed everything. His voice cracked. My career, my reputation. I am a god in this city. You're a butcher, Victor. Maya kept her voice level. And it's over. It's over when I say it's over. He cocked the hammer. Put it down, Harrington. The voice came from the corridor. Victor spun. The nurses stood there. 20 of them. Marcus. Janelle's colleagues from radiology. Nurses from pediatrics, oncology, the burn unit. They filled the hallway shoulder to shoulder, blocking any escape. They weren't armed with guns. They held IV poles, oxygen tanks, heavy clipboards. They looked terrified, but they weren't running. Get out of my way! Victor screamed, swinging the pistol toward them. I'll fire! I swear to God! No, you won't. Marcus stepped forward, his voice steadier than Maya had ever heard it. Because there are cameras everywhere, Victor, and we're all witnesses. You can't fire everyone. Victor's hand wavered. The weight of the moment, the sheer number of people standing against him, cracked something in his fragile psyche. While his attention fractured, Maya moved. She didn't attack him. She reached back and ripped the hard drive from the server rack with a grunt, snapping the locking mechanism. The screen went dark. Victor whirled. Give that to me. Maya held up the drive. You want it? Come take it. Sirens wailed outside, not the hospitals, but police sirens. Real police. State investigators summoned by Morrison outside the Harrington family's corrupted jurisdiction. Victor looked at the gun, at Maya, at the wall of nurses. The weapon clattered to the floor. He collapsed to his knees and began to sob like a child whose toy had been broken. Maya stepped past him, over his trembling form. She looked at Marcus and the others. Thank you, she said quietly. Marcus managed a shaky smile. Trauma team, right? We stick together. Maya nodded. She looked at the hard drive in her hand. Let's go watch the news. The grand lobby of Mercy General had been transformed into a media circus. Marble floors reflected the glare of television lights. The air buzzed with reporters and cameras and expensive cologne. Edmund Harrington stood at a mahogany podium, bathed in white light, wearing a suit that cost more than some nurses earned in a year. His face was arranged in an expression of solemn concern. Behind him, board members nodded like puppets. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice was smooth, commanding. It is with profound regret that I must address the violent incident that occurred within these walls today. He paused, letting reporters lean in. A disturbed individual, Maya Reyes, a former soldier we hired in good faith, suffered a severe psychological break. Afflicted by untreated combat trauma, she endangered a critically ill patient and launched a vicious, unprovoked assault on my son, Chief Surgeon Victor Harrington. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Edmund had them captivated. We are cooperating fully with authorities to ensure this dangerous woman faces justice. Let this serve as a warning. Bzzzzz. Static tore across the massive LED wall behind the podium. The hospital logo twisted, distorted, then dissolved into digital noise. Edmund frowned, glancing back. Technical difficulties. Fix it immediately. But the screen didn't stay dark. A grainy image materialized. Security footage. Time stamped today. The image showed Trauma Bay 1, a patient flatlining, Maya pleading, and Dr. Victor Harrington standing over the dying man with contempt on his face. Then the audio hit, boosted, clarified, thundering through the lobby's premium speakers. Know your place. Garbage. The video showed the slap, the hair pulling, the violent yank that sent Maya crashing into the cabinets. The collective gasp sucked the oxygen from the room. Edmund's face went white. He spun toward his technical team. Cut the feed. Cut it now. But the footage was already shrinking to a corner of the screen, replaced by a waterfall of documents. Confidential. Do not distribute. NDA enforced. Case 287, patient deceased. Cause, surgical negligence. Surgeon, Victor Harrington. Settlement, $3.2 million. Cover-up authorized by Edmund Harrington. Case 441, wrong limb amputation. Case 612, fatal overdose. Dozens more. A decade of buried bodies. This is fabricated, Edmund screamed into the microphone. Deep fakes. A cyber attack. Security. Clear the room. They look authentic to me, Mr. Harrington. The voice was deep, commanding. The crowd parted. General Morrison walked through the glass doors in full combat fatigues, flanked by military police and state troopers, and beside him walked Maya Reyes, still wearing the dirty maintenance coveralls, face smudged with grease, a cracked hard drive clutched in her hand like a trophy. Edmund froze. He gripped the podium until his knuckles went white. You, he hissed. Officers, arrest her. She stole property. She hacked our... The lead state trooper, a granite-jawed man, walked past Maya without a glance. He climbed the steps to the podium and stopped directly in front of Edmund Harrington. Edmund Harrington, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, obstruction of justice, tampering with evidence, and accessory to negligent homicide. He pulled handcuffs from his belt. Turn around, hands behind your back. This is insanity! Edmund struggled as the trooper spun him. I'll destroy this department. I'll have your badge. Maya Reyes is the criminal. Maya walked up the steps. The cameras turned to her. 1,000 lenses focused on the woman in the grease-stained coveralls. She stopped inches from Edmund. I'm not a criminal, she said, her voice amplified by the microphone he'd just been screaming into. And I'm not a ghost. She held up the hard drive. But ghosts haunt you for your sins. Her voice dropped to a whisper only he could hear. Consider yourself haunted. As troopers dragged the screaming billionaire off the stage, the elevator doors opened. 2 more officers emerged with Victor Harrington between them. He wasn't screaming. He was weeping, his surgical coat hanging off one shoulder, unable to meet the eyes of the staff he'd terrorized. The lobby fell silent as both Harringtons were loaded into waiting squad cars. Then, clap, slow, deliberate. Maya turned. On the mezzanine balcony above, Staff Sergeant Torres sat in a wheelchair, pushed by a military medic. He was pale, attached to portable oxygen, but his hands were coming together. Clap, clap. Then, Marcus stepped from the crowd of staff and began to applaud. Then Janelle. Then the surgeons who had been too afraid to speak. The sound swelled from a trickle to a roar, a thunderous ovation that shook the marble walls. They weren't cheering for a celebrity. They were cheering for the woman in the maintenance coveralls, who had stood in the fire and refused to burn. Maya shifted uncomfortably, looking for an exit. Morrison stepped beside her. That was one hell of an operation, Captain. I'd say you're overqualified for changing bedpans. It needed doing, sir. The Pentagon has a new initiative. Morrison watched the crowd. Medical rapid response teams for high-risk zones. Someone who handles a scalpel and a crisis equally well. I can have your commission reinstated by morning. Full honors. Maya looked at the general, then at the balcony, where Torres gave her a thumbs up. Then at the nurses, Marcus, Janelle, the team she'd fought for. They were smiling at her, not as a stranger, as one of their own. For the first time since leaving the service, the noise in Maya's head, the explosions, the screams, the guilt, went quiet. I appreciate the offer, General. Her voice was soft. But I think my mission is here. Morrison raised an eyebrow. Here? Scrubbing floors? No. Maya watched a new ambulance pull into the bay, lights flashing. Saving lives. Besides, someone has to make sure the new chief surgeon doesn't develop a god complex. Morrison laughed, a deep, barking sound. Fair enough. Dismissed, Captain. Maya nodded. She turned from the cameras, from the applause, and walked toward the emergency room doors. She didn't walk with her head down anymore. She didn't hide the shrapnel scars or the unit tattoo on her wrist. She pushed through the double doors and stepped into the ER's chaos. The smell of antiseptic and blood hit her. For the first time in years, it didn't smell like war. It smelled like purpose. Marcus, she called, grabbing fresh gloves from a wall dispenser. Bay 4 needs a saline drip and suture kit. Let's move. Maya Reyes was back on duty.